I now have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Cynthia Bentzen-Mercer, this morning's keynote speaker. She is a best-selling author, speaker, board-certified executive coach, and distinguished talent and organizational development strategist with over 3 decades of international executive leadership experience. She also has a close connection to the beer business, as her aunt and mentor, Mary Straight, was the president of the Missouri Beer Wholesalers Association for 37 years. Please welcome to the stage Dr. Bentzen-Mercer.
Thank you. Good morning. It is so fantastic to be with all of you, and we're going to go from macro as we listen to that fantastic political landscape update and then the economic update to the micro. And we're going to focus on you. Whether you are at the C-suite and here with some of your team members, or you're an emerging leader in this industry, all of this applies if you enter this conversation with a growth mindset. Erin mentioned my Aunt Mary Strati, and I was introduced to NBWA when I was about 12 years old. So I spent the first 12 years of my life in Southern California, but my entire family was from Missouri, and so my mom and my stepfather thought it'd be a great idea to move my sister and I, at 12 years old, middle school, to Russellville, Missouri, from Southern California. That was a little culture shock, right? On 50 acres, and then we tried to be farmers, so it was a whole thing. Green Acres comes to mind in a lot of ways when I think about how we managed that. But Aunt Mary lived in St. Louis, and so I was allowed to take the train during the summer and go spend several days with Aunt Mary and work in her office. And I would watch her. I looked at how she dressed. I listened to her on the phone. I sat in at her desk. And that was back when you actually licked stamps and licked envelopes. And so that was my job, typed a few things and filed. But I remember that being so formative, watching her do her work as part of the Missouri Beer Wholesalers Association. Fast forward about 30 years, I had eventually moved back to California, had lived out there, was raising my children, but had an opportunity and was moved to St. Louis about 14 years ago, and Aunt Mary was still there. And not long after my moving to St. Louis, her husband, my Uncle Don, passed away. And I was responsible for a lot of things as a chief administrative officer of an organization, one of which was foundation and fundraising. And so I had a lot of these events, and as a single woman, I frankly hated going to these events. You know, you get all dressed up and going by yourself, and you have to mix and mingle, and just, we'll get into talent in a minute. I can tell you I'm a competent extrovert, but going and being alone in these massive events was not my favorite thing to do. So it occurred to me, you know, the best person in the world to take as my plus one was my Aunt Mary, because she could talk to anybody. And there may be some of you in the room that actually worked with her back in the day. But this woman was a chameleon. She could talk to anybody about anything. She could find something to talk to them about and to relate to them about. So I knew I could take her. I knew she wouldn't drink too much and embarrass me, right? She could hold her own. I knew that she could be in an industry that had a lot of men and make conversation, and that she would be a great partner. And so several years ago, and a whole lot of hair color ago, that is Aunt Mary and I at some of our events. I share that story with you because I think that mentors matter. And whether you are a family member who is a 3rd or 4th generation heir apparent within your family business, or you've been brought in from the outside to continue to grow and develop a family business, or you're an emerging leader who is still determining your path but has fallen in love with this industry. Those mentors, those people that we can look up to are meaningful. Those observations can be formative, but they don't have to fully define us. Aunt Mary and I had very different gifts and talents. We had a lot of shared and overlap in terms of our passions and our interests and the things that we were good at, but we also augmented each other really well. And so wherever you come into the equation, understanding you individually inside the legacies in which you serve is really, really important. And it brings forth your authenticity without jeopardizing the culture of the organization. So it starts really with purpose. And we're gonna talk about really two things in detail today, this morning. We're gonna talk about proclaiming your purpose, because I believe a clear sense of purpose gives voice to your values and dismisses that which dares to defy them. And we're gonna talk about talent. And the tricky thing about this might be that when you think about purpose, so many of us, particularly in family-owned organizations, and I've worked for 4 out of the 5 companies were family-owned, privately held over my career, is that it's easy to get so attached and so aligned, and I would offer that that's a good thing to the family organizational purpose, that we lose sight of our own sense of self and what gets us out of bed in the morning. And so we're gonna take some time to kind of unapologetically, guilt-free, give time and investment into ourselves. So how do you proclaim your purpose? Well, it starts with really understanding your values. Now, you're gonna find that in this section, there's gonna be a lot of homework, because this isn't something we do in general session and you pop out on a piece of paper and you leave and you're like, good to go. And I'm gonna give you some examples of some of the challenges and struggles that some of my clients have had. You have a paper in front of you, so you're gonna have some opportunity to take some notes and write some things down. But when we think about our values, that's really our who. What do we care about? What matters to us? What are our non-negotiables? What are most important? When we think of our mission, not the mission on the wall, not the mission in the lobby, but our mission, what is my mission that gets me out of bed every morning, individually, in addition to and in concert with my organization's mission? What is my personal mission? That's my why. And then my vision. What do I see for the future? There's a lot of change in the beer industry. We've heard about that this morning. We heard about that last month at the main conference. There's a lot of change going on. The next generation of leaders are gonna have to be really adept at navigating change and really clear on the vision for the future. And that's your where. Where are you going and how are you gonna get there? And all of those things together are how you proclaim your individual purpose. So I want to give you some examples, because I think when you just look at it this way, kind of on the surface, it seems kind of simple. I coach, as my introduction said, I coach C-suite executives, and I also do group and cohort coaching. And I've got both of those running right now. And so I brought some of their examples as they've been going through this process with me. So when you start documenting your values, the very first thing you want to do is just brainstorm the words that came to mind. What are the words that come to mind when you think about what are the things I value? Ask people you trust. One of my women I coach said, she asked her family. She said, these are the things that came up. Do these resonate? Do you see these? Are there other things that you think I value that I haven't written down? What's non-negotiable? It's a really good way to kind of flip that. What am I not willing to accept? And then mind map it. So I'm gonna give you a really brief example, but before I do, I want right in this moment on your piece of paper, I just want you to write down what words come to mind for you. Not the words of your organization, your values. What are the words that come to mind, your non-negotiables? It could be 1, it could be 3, it's just whatever comes to mind. Just jot those down. Refining this is going to be a homework assignment. So let me show you what one of my clients came up with. This is a chief information officer that I'm working with, and her original list was this: authenticity, dignity, integrity, quality, excellence. You can see the list. Take just a moment and look at that list and tell me if there's anything you observe. Just feel free to shout it out. We're going to try to have some participation, even though it's kind of a large group. Yes? Team? Yeah. Team-oriented, okay, awesome. What else do you notice? Any other observations? By the way, there's not a right or wrong. It's just what strikes you about the list. Do you see any overlap? Yeah, I see some heads nodding. One of the things that, as we were going through this, that I noticed is she's coming from an environment where she feels that there's not a lot of trust. She's coming from an environment where she feels that there's sometimes a lack of integrity, right? Do you see that sort of thematic through her words? So what I encouraged her to do is start to couple those, start to bucket them, start to think about how do these things relate to one another. Now, there's no right or wrong. These are your values. In this case, these are her values. So it's her job or opportunity to bucket these and put these into categories that resonate ultimately with her. And where she landed was accountability, integrity, excellence, and authenticity. Now, you certainly want to bump those up against your organizational values, and I assume that they're well aligned, but what are yours? And then what I encourage people to do is to put this on your LinkedIn profile, right up there in your headline. Values, core values: authenticity, integrity, excellence, accountability. I feel like sense of humor should be in there, but that's probably just one of mine. And then you put those on your blueprint. So this is where you all are going to start working on your blueprint, your leadership blueprint. You know, we spend a lot of hours in, as leaders, myself included, learning about how to be the best leader for others, texts and tips and techniques to be the best leader for others. This, at least the beginning of this session and what we're going to do in breakouts, is really going to be this opportunity, this unique opportunity for you to focus within. So I encourage you to take advantage of that. So your core values, your mission statement. People get stuck on their mission statement. This is harder than it sounds. It has 3 elements: who, why, and how. The who should not be you. The who is who you serve, right? Your mission is to serve who. Why? Why do you care? Why does it matter? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And how? So let me give you an example of one of my clients. First draft. Setting people up for success by doing the right thing in the right way for the right reason. What do you think? Is there a who? What's the who? Listen, I saw the flamingos last night. Y'all got to pipe up. People, right. Is there a how? By doing the right things. What's her why? For the right reason. Could I take this mission statement and plug it into any one of you in the beer and beverage industry? Could I plug it into somebody in healthcare? Could I attach it to a truck driver? It's not terribly specific, would you agree? I don't necessarily get this overwhelming sense of mission when it comes to the why. That's what's challenging. That's why this is homework. So here's my mission statement. Again, missions, there's no right or wrong. It's a matter of continuing to iterate. But by empowering self-agency and challenging social and self-imposed limitations, I equip every person with insight into their natural talents so they may unleash and grow their full potential and live into their most profound sense of purpose. Who? Every person. How? Empowering self-agency and challenging self-limiting limitations. Why? So they may unleash their full potential. That's what gets me out of bed every morning. That's why I do what I do. What gets you out of bed every morning? So you have a spot. Now's not going to be the time to do it, but that is a spot for you to be thinking about separate and apart as a leader who's going to build your own legacy, honoring and supporting and flourishing the incredible family-owned businesses that you have the privilege of serving inside. What is your stamp? What is your footprint? All right, vision. Others-centered, aspirational, and future-focused. So this is a different client. This was his first attempt to serve in an organization where I'm valued, cherished, seen, and where my personal beliefs align to those of the organization, and I feel every day that I make a difference to those I interact with and touch. What do you think? First attempt. Is it others-centered? No. Thank you, brave soul. Is it, it's aspirational, I suppose. It's a little future-oriented. This isn't the vision about what I want to accomplish for me. This is a vision of where do I see my opportunity to use my unique gifts and talents to further the growth and development and flourishing of this business that I've been privileged to be a part of. Aligned with and connected with, of course, the organization's vision. Does that resonate? So your homework assignment is to become introspective around this notion of what is and how do you proclaim your sense of purpose. My vision is to make a meaningful contribution to society that embraces each person's unique gifts so that all would find dignity, joy, and purpose in their life's work. Now, I have a pro tip for you, but you have to be careful with it. And I didn't use it for mine, so. If you can get sort of that rough draft, just put the words on paper and run it through ChatGPT. Don't use exactly what it spits out. That would not only be cheating, but it would not be authentic. And the whole point is to be authentic. But it does help to reframe and give words and language that might be inspiring or motivational or provocative as you're thinking about how to think through and frame your mission and vision statements. So then you have to really run that through where you are in your journey and where you are in your path, right? So if you are a family member, a third or fourth or what have you generation family member who is the heir apparent within your family business, you really need to think through your values and your mission and your vision from how do you continue to honor and evolve the culture so that it remains relevant with all the change that's happening, the changes in the workforce, the changes in consumer behavior, et cetera. How do you evolve and remain relevant while still cherishing and fostering and honoring the legacy and the culture that exists? If you've been brought in from outside the family, how do you ensure the values and mission and vision that you hold are aligned and in support of. And if you are an emerging leader who's still learning your path in this incredible industry, how do you make certain that you're a great culture fit within the organization and within the role that you're in? And we're going to talk more about role in just a moment. So depending on where you come from depends on the lens with which you think about your sense of purpose. But I want to underline the fact that merely going into adopting what other people aspire, what other people want, is leaving so much of your authenticity, your fingerprints, your gifts, your talents on the table. And quite frankly, we need the next generation of leaders to continue to move us forward. And so, as a homework assignment over the next few months, I really encourage you to give thoughtful consideration and write these down and evolve them as you evolve and as you grow. All right, now we're going to get into sort of the meat and potatoes of where you align yourself in terms of architecting your journey. Identify a route, pick a road, choose a lane, begin with the end in mind. Now, this is not to tattle on anybody, but how many of you had the opportunity to complete the talent spotlight? Some of you are like, Okay. Well, good, because you're going to be happy you did when we get into the breakout sessions. And we're gonna talk a lot about that. Not sure if anybody sees themselves in this picture. As we think about, people are like, oh, I know that. As we think about talent, you know, talent is really visible in the arts, right? Talent's visible in Dancing with the Stars, or lack thereof. Talent's visible in The Voice, again, or lack thereof, right? When we get into business, sometimes it's harder to put our finger on, right? So here's what I want you to do. I want you to think for a moment. About the best performer you've ever known. Hopefully you've known many. The best performer you've ever known. I want you to think about that person. Picture that person in your mind, that you know that person's name, right? You have that person in your mind. I want you to think about what were the attributes that made that individual such a rock star. What were the characteristics, the attributes, the words you would use to describe why that person was so fantastic? You got it? All right. At risk of this large audience, we're gonna go for it. I want you just to shout them out to me. From here. Humility. Focused. Dedicated, honest. Confidence. Genuine. Passion. Say that again. Original. Are y'all asleep over here? Hang on one second. Okay, wake up, left side of the room. Energy, thank you. What else? Connected with the audience. Say it again. Relentless. What else? Commitment. Those are good words, right? Dependable. I always like when sense of humor comes up. That's always an attribute that I like. What didn't you hear? You didn't hear they were 28. They were 57. You didn't hear they had 12 years of experience. They had 2 decades of experience. You didn't hear they went to Harvard or Stanford or didn't graduate college at all. You didn't hear their GPA. So often, what we do to ourselves and to those that we bring into our organization is we use very biased and very non-predictive assessments to guess or predict performance. Now, don't raise your hand if you've ever done this, but I've heard that people sometimes will take a resume and they'll kind of backdate based on the graduation date, and then they're like, oh, they're probably too young to be able to do that job, or they're probably too old to be able to do that job, right? Here's what, oh my goodness, it's not in there. My slide is not coming up. There's a predictive index slide. I will get it to all of you, I promise. Here's what I can tell you. Age has a inverse correlation to predicting success. Inverse. I suspect many of you in this room at some point, if not now, are responsible for leading those that are older than you or have more experience than you. Would that be a fair? I see lots of heads nodding. Age has an inverse correlation to predicting success. And if my slide would have populated, which I apologize that it did not, and I will get to you, what you will find is none of these have more than a 0.6 validated predictive correlation to success on the job. Now, the talent spotlight, and I have no ownership in the organization, so this is not a commercial for them, but I've studied their science as a client for 18 years, and here's what I can tell you. They have a predictive validity of their assessments of 0.8 and over. What does that tell me? It tells me that when you participate in the talent assessments that are based on the study of the best, so their studies are built based on high-performing leaders, and the particular assessment you went through was part of the future of work study, looking at what leadership needed to look like in the future and studying the best and saying, here are the talent themes that future leaders have high intensity in compared to all others. And when they study the best, if you think of a bell curve, they literally take that far top 10% of exceptional, and the questions that they answer uniquely different than everyone else make the cut for the interview, for the assessment. What does that mean? It means it takes out even the above average, right? They're really looking at the very best of the best, identifying the themes and the answers that correlate. There's no right or wrong answer to any of those questions. It's intensity. Because everyone has talent, the question is talent for what? So let's talk about talent, and let's talk about how we think about it individually. So oftentimes we confuse and we roll together this notion of talent, skills, and knowledge. We sort of clump them all into one, and we think we're being discerning, but typically we're not. So knowledge is what you know. It's being able to recite the recipe. It's being able to walk through the specific details of scheduling. It's being able to articulate the sales process. That's knowledge. I can remember it, I can keep it to memory, and I can repeat it. Skill is the ability to then execute that knowledge. I can bake the cookies and people will eat them. Baking is not one of my talents. It's not one of my skills either. So it's the ability to execute on that, right? These are learned. If I have the cognitive ability, I can learn to read and remember and recite and then execute for the most part. Talent is that I'm good at it. I like doing it. It happens spontaneously. And ultimately, it's your unique superpower. Your talents are your unique superpower. They're your fingerprints. They're what you will build your legacy on. I had the beautiful opportunity of talking to many of you before today and preparing for today. And some of you in the emerging leader category, some of you who are outside of the family and serving as leadership within the family, some of you that are third and fourth generation, really so interesting. And hearing about, here are the qualities and attributes of my dad or my mom, or here's what my grandfather brought to bear, and then this is what my mom or dad did differently. And the question is, and what will be your stamp? What will be your legacy? What will people be talking about a new coworker orientation 20 years from now related to your superpower? So if you were with me at Brew, some of this will sound familiar, but we're going to go a lot deeper, and that is a talent. This is a lot to unpack. We're going to break it down. It's not teachable. People really get stuck with this. Guess what? Dependable, creative, innovative, unique, all of those words and attributes that you all described as the best performers you ever knew, they had nothing to do with skill and knowledge. I've talked to thousands and thousands of leaders around the world on the topic of talent. And do you know, in every single session, no one brings up skill and knowledge related things. Well, they could drive a truck like nobody else, right? They don't bring up the skill and knowledge. They bring up the natural talents. They're non-teachable. They're hardwired. They're DNA. They're spontaneous. You can't help yourself. They're not acquired through effort or education, but they are like a muscle. You have to develop and grow them, or they will atrophy. And they provide intrinsic satisfaction. And here's the beautiful thing that I think is the most powerful part of living into talent, is that it can be cultivated to near perfect performance. And that never goes away. It's exponential growth. So wherever you are in your career, even if you're at the top of your game, there's still more muscles to exercise. It's what gives me such joy when I'm working with C-suite executives. Here's the graph. It just was out of order. How about that? So as you can see, this is the predictive validity and how limited. And for those of you that are in research or statistics, and I know I had to do a fair amount of that in my doctoral program, this is not highly predictive. In fact, some of these are at the same predictive validity as handwriting analysis. So think about that when you're doubting yourself. Well, I don't have as many years experience as so-and-so. I'm not old enough to be thus and so. And you start to have that imposter syndrome, not highly predictive to your potential and ability to be successful. Also, when you're selecting people in to the privilege of serving within your organizations, remember that some of the things that we think are important aren't terribly predictive. And we may be missing out on some really amazing talent. And the last thing I'll say about this, because I've done a tremendous amount of research, is that women and Black, Indigenous, and people of color statistically over-index on performance. They want to be excellent at something, perfectionist at something, can do it with their eyes closed 10 out of 10 before they want to raise their hand for the next role. Our wonderful, amazing white male counterparts fake it till they make it. And that's not a judgment. That is, we need to take a page out of that playbook if that resonates with you, because we're putting a false sense of limitation in our own minds. So I encourage you, build the skills and knowledge. There's always a minimum requirement. I don't want a surgeon, performing surgery on me that doesn't meet the minimum requirements of being a surgeon. So there's always a minimum requirement or minimum skill and knowledge necessary. But if you're gonna roll the dice on talent. So then you have to think about, as you architect your journey based on where you're coming from in this process, if you're a family member who is going to be given the reins at some point to take on this amazing business, what is the lane that you're going to take? What are your unique superpowers, your unique gifts and talents that augment, complement that of the previous generation? If you're from outside the family and been given this privilege of serving and leading, what road or path will you take? And for those of you that are emerging leaders, what route? You have a lot of opportunity to determine which path you take based on your natural gifts and talents. Remember that it doesn't have to be a career ladder. It can be a career lattice. Job expansions, lateral moves. I've taken lateral moves to get experience in other industries. I've taken job expansions to learn things that were outside of my normal wheelhouse. I mean, those are growth opportunities. They don't always have to be associated with title and status. So if you've had the opportunity to participate in the Talent Spotlight, you'll have the opportunity to write down your top 5 talent themes. And in our breakout sessions, we're gonna go through all of the talent themes in detail and talk about how those show up based on where you are in your leadership. Now, it did tickle me a little bit. I got here about 7:30 last night, and man, the place was rocking. The music was pumping, there were flamingos on stilts, and all I could think about was, I wonder if we've studied this Talent Spotlight post an event like that, if somebody's participating last night. So I'm sure it's still highly predictive. It just, you might have a lot more fun that showed up in your spotlight. I did want to mention to you that we only are touching on a couple of elements of this entire framework of your career journey and your professional journey. We're touching on the self-agency component. If any of you feel so inspired or so inclined, either as owners or leaders who have individuals that you think would really benefit from continuing to grow and develop, or if you personally are interested in exploring topics that are unique to you, because of my love for MBWA, I'm happy to offer a free coaching call with you. So you can scan the QR code, you can schedule the time, and we'll spend 45 minutes together talking specifically about your journey, your questions, your talent profiles, et cetera. So know that that's to you. Here's what's really important is we're gonna focus on ourselves, and then I think I'm cutting out, and then move to how everyone in the room is a leader of people. Here are some really important things to remember. Everyone has talent. Everyone has talent. The question is, talent for what? Sometimes we find a great alignment with the talent is well placed for the role the person is in, and they've got great skill and knowledge, and they're a top performer, and that should be celebrated and recognized, right? Top right quadrant. Sometimes we find that somebody has great talent, great potential, but they're a little green. They don't have all the skill and knowledge. We consider that a high potential. We need to invest deeply in those people. That's terrible attrition. When we lose people that are those top performers or we lose those high potentials, that's terrible attrition. Sometimes we have individuals that have great skill and knowledge, institutional knowledge. They've been around forever, but they don't have strong talent for role. They're in a people-facing role, and guess what? They don't really like people. Not probably a great fit. Maybe want to consider recasting that individual. And then from time to time, we have those decisions where we have those individuals that don't have the skill and knowledge, and they're not well placed in the role that is a fit for their talent. And so that, my friends, is what we call a recast or a compassionate bus stop, where we invite them to go work in another industry. Okay? But the point is everyone has talent. So we're not judging, well, they don't have talent. They don't have talent for that role, or they do. Varsity versus recreational. What do we mean by this? How many of you want to work on a recreational team? How many of you want to be, everybody gets a turn at quarterback? I don't. If I'm the best quarterback, I want to be quarterback. I don't want to have to go be a kicker tomorrow because it's your turn to be quarterback. I was in Dallas yesterday, and I'm a Green Bay Packer fan. I had to really be careful of my examples, right? But recreational is everybody gets a turn. This isn't the YMCA. Put your best people in the best roles on your team and let them do the best job and create that cohesion. Talented people want to work on a varsity team. Just versus fair. Fair is everybody gets the same thing, as my 3- and 2-year-old granddaughters. That's not fair, Cece. Now, life isn't fair, girls. Just is everyone gets what they need for where they are and what's going to be best for them. Just because one person has a certain commitment that they need to be able to be off on certain days at a certain time doesn't mean that either everyone gets that or no one gets it. Justice is doing the right thing for each individual. And I will offer this to you: with everything changing in this industry, all the things that you can't control, building a talent-based organization is absolutely the only sustainable competitive advantage. It will win the day. So before I wrap these remarks and we go to Q&A, I want to share a really personal story with all of you. I mentioned that at 12 I became aware of National Beer Wholesalers Association through my Aunt Mary. But probably like everyone in the room, or most of you in the room, I became aware of beer by my daddy. And when I was a little girl, if you look back through our old family photos, they're like the sepia old family photos. There are these family events, be it Christmas or Thanksgiving or barbecues, and I'm sitting on my daddy's lap, and he's got the old Coors can in his hand, right? The old gold Coors can in his hand. And that was his drink of choice. And he called it an adult sody. And so back then we would go to the drive-in. It sounds like I'm 100 years old. Back then I'm really not. Back then we would go to the drive-in, and they would put a cooler in the back seat next to my sister and I, and my daddy would say, "Girls, grab me an adult sody." And we'd have to fish around and get the Coors for my dad. In September of this year, just 2 months ago, my dad had double bypass surgery, and the surgery itself went quite well. We were pretty pleased with the surgery itself. My sister actually flew out to be there the week of the surgery. She's in Nashville, and this was all happening in Southern California, and I'm in Missouri. And about 4 days after surgery, he hadn't yet been released from the hospital, they let him have a Bud Light. And that was his now had been his latest drink of choice. And so there's a picture of my daddy in his hospital gown, of all things, holding his Bud Light that my sister sent to me. And apparently he said to her, "You got the can in the picture, right?" Sadly, that's the last picture I have of my dad. He then acquired, hospital-acquired COVID, which led to sepsis, which led to kidney failure, and we said goodbye to him on October 24th, just a few weeks ago, 3 days before his 75th birthday. And I share that with you, not to make you sad. I share that with you because as I was preparing for this presentation, and I was thinking about purpose, and I was thinking about mission, and I was thinking about what you all do, and the impact that you have on the economy, and the impact you have on giving people jobs and the workforce, and the impact you have on communities, and the impact you have on families, and making memories and celebrations. That, to me, is work that should be celebrated. And so for the work that you do and the joy that you bring in so many environments, thank you. Thank you for all you do. All right, I think we have about 9 minutes for some Q&A before we break. Can we pull the house lights up just a little bit? If you don't mind, so you can see their gorgeous faces. All right, what questions do you guys have? I think there's points for this, so if we can bribe you. Aaron.
I just wanted to add, reemphasize something that you mentioned. I encourage everybody in here to take advantage of the free session that doctor's offering. I did that with her before the conference, and 30 minutes, but what we were able to get into in that conversation was enlightening and re-energizing and valuable time spent. So I definitely encourage y'all to take advantage of that. I think it was worth it, and it'll be worth your time too. Thanks.
Thank you. And Cynthia's perfectly fine. I worked in healthcare for so long, I don't get to go by doctor very often. What else? What are you wondering about? What struck you? What don't you agree with? Where are you a skeptic? I can handle it. I'm very patient. Anyone? Yes.
Are there specific talents that you see in like the C-suite executives or whatever? Like which ones appear more often?
Yeah, so thank you for asking that. By the way, what's your name and where are you from?
Jack, and I'm with Andrews.
Okay, good. In case you don't know Jack, now you do. Are there different talents that we see in C-suite executives? And the answer is yes. And so I'm going to answer that a couple of ways, just briefly. First of all, when Talent Plus, the organization that happens to be the producer of the Talent Spotlight, when they study executives, they studied C-suite executives, and they've studied them for over 50 years. And so they've looked at top performing C-suite executives, so chiefs of XYZ, right? Chief executive officer, chief operating officer, et cetera, et cetera. And what they have found and revalidated over and over and over again are really 10 talent themes that are most intense in top performing high-level executive leaders. Now, it doesn't mean that every executive leader has all 10 themes with intensity, right? Most of us are not water walkers. But when we're looking at an executive and we say that this particular chief of, pick a word, really needs to be creative and very strategic and highly relational, those are the themes we're looking for. It may be less important that they have high persuasion or have a lot of individualized approach, that they're really connect with people on an individual level. So there's 10 themes. Those are different themes than the interview that y'all participated in, which looked at future leaders, and it was really more of a cross-section in terms of the themes. But when we think about the themes, and we'll get into this in our breakouts, it's really a matter of how did they come together in terms of that composite. And one of the things we know, and the reason why there's only 5 listed, even though there's more themes, and it doesn't mean you weren't intense in all of them, or 8 of the 10, or what have you, we know that 80% of the way that you show up happens and is expressed in those top 5 themes, those top 5 most intense themes. So that's why we cut it at the 5. But yes, there are some unique differences. And to be honest with you, in my corporate days, there were individuals that were great at the VP level or the director level, but they did not have the talent themes that were really intense enough for them to move into that C-suite role. And some of that was really around strategic agility. What other questions do you have? Yes?
How do you use it on a daily basis?
How do you use your mission statement and vision statement on a daily basis? I love that. Couple of ways. So what I recommend is, first of all, by writing it down. Oh, and can you tell us who you are and where you're from?
Austin from Ohio.
Austin from Ohio. Thank you, Austin from Ohio. A couple of ways. I mentioned put your values on your LinkedIn profile. I think that's a great way of just letting the universe know who you are and what you value. For me, and for the folks that I coach and work with, I request them or challenge them to check back in with their mission and their vision statement on a quarterly basis. To make certain I'm holding true to that, to make certain that, is that what's getting me up out of bed every morning? Am I focused on the right things? Am I getting diverted in terms of what I find important in my life and where I'm spending my time and energy? Right? And so it's really, I would call it a compass to ensure that you're staying true to what it is that you seek to achieve, that the difference you want to make in the world and within your organization and on the hearts and minds of those that you serve alongside. What other questions do you have? About 3 more minutes. You have 3 minutes to earn points. Yes, ma'am. I'm going to let you use that. Tell us who you are.
Kelsey from Raise. How much do you balance personal and professional traits when you're working through homework like this?
Yeah, how much do you personal and professional? Well, here's what I would tell you about talent themes is that they're universal. Now, here's what the talent spotlight isn't, and I oftentimes when I have more time kind of contrast this because I was in training and development for a lot of years, so I've been exposed to Myers-Briggs and DISC, and there's one with like Pooh and Eeyore and all the guys. Those are interesting, they're informative, and they create awareness about different people think and show up different ways, personality-wise, et cetera. And what I hear a lot of people say is, well, I might be a Pooh in the workplace, but I'm an Eeyore at home, or whatever it might be. Or I'm a D here and I'm an I there. With the talent assessment, it's core to your DNA. It's core to that spontaneous, exceptional, can't help myself, consistent. So it's who you are all of the time, right? So it should feel very much like this represents me as a person most of the time or all of the time. With your mission and vision, what I encourage people to do, because I do career coaching, I don't do life coaching. I think it infuses into people's lives, but I'm a career business coach, is that I really encourage your vision and your values and your mission statement to be professionally focused. Doesn't mean you couldn't do that in your home life, but the work I do and that I'm challenging you guys to do is thinking of it through a professional lens. All right, we have 1 more minute, and I see Kim is walking this way. Who has the final question? No? All right. Thank you guys so much. I'll look forward to seeing you in breakout sessions.